What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 19th episode of the officially named Boundless Businesses. Yeah, there we go, podcast. So excited to bring you guys a kind of a different podcast, taking a look at what we do when we're actually getting positive responses from an outbound campaign. How do you use that for two things? One, moving those positive responses into closed deals. So what are the next steps to do that? And then how can you take negative feedback and or neutral feedback to actually make your campaigns better? It's something that we often look for when we're launching campaigns. Yes, we want meetings, but we want to know why people are saying no and then make our campaigns better. So Justine, Larissa, good morning. Hello. How are you guys doing?
Good morning.
Doing good.
This
My
Friday, I
dog
can feel
is
like
my dog is making me a little bit sleep deprived, so I might be a little snappy. I don't know.
I feel that. I went to my sister's graduation yesterday and we didn't get home after dinner until like 12. And for everyone who knows me, I like to go to bed early. And yeah, so I feel that. I feel it today, but we got cold brew, we got lead gen. I mean, we're gonna crush it. So Justine, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, do you want to start with the positive responses first or the negative responses?
Yeah, so I let's end on a positive note. So we'll start with negative ones, but let me jump in and kind of talk to you guys through what we look for. So specifically, when we're launching an outbound campaign, I am not looking for the first no or the second or the third. I really want quality and quantity in there. So if I get responses back that a domain or an email was not received or anything like that, that's not a negative response. I'm talking about a human actually read my email, and most email software has a way for you to see if someone opened it and how many times and when was the last time. And then I'm looking for how many people are responding to that. And again, if it's negative, what are they saying? So we'll go into a couple of examples, but there are different levels of negative, right? There's like the no, thank you, the more explicit ones that isn't good for our audience to hear. But there's different levels of negativity, and the same with positive, right? Jumping on a call right, like let's jump on a call right now. I need to fix this versus tell me more. There's differences in there, but what you're looking for is at least 20 pieces of feedback, right? So if you're launching a campaign of 100, you're probably going to get 2 to 5 responses. So you're going to have to send out, in this case, maybe 400 emails to get enough feedback to really make a meaningful change to a campaign. But, I say that, and then if you're getting like a lot of no's in the first little bit, definitely have a look at that. But you need at least 20 responses, positive, negative, neutral, to analyze what are you saying. Now, if you're not getting responses, that's a different story. That's usually indication within the first 200. If you're not getting a single response, that something is up. It's either targeting, messaging, offer, something's up. So if you're not getting responses, 200, pause the campaign, see if people, one, are actually getting your email. Because if it's not getting delivered, right, or not opened, there's a huge problem there. Then you can't make an informed decision. But let's say that you do have those 20 responses. Justine, what are some negative ones that you've seen from one of our campaigns?
And also,
Yeah,
quick side
so
note, these are all coming from the same email campaign. So this is a cold outbound email campaign. All these responses are coming from the same campaign.
Yeah, so and just for an effort to be more transparent, let me tell you how many we sent. This was it's just a small sample that I took over 2 weeks. So let me just grab that data so we can see exactly how many were done. So last week we had in total 150, and then that's this week. And last week we had 140. So what is that? 150, 140, so almost 300, 290, something like that.
And of those, can you give us some high level stats? What's the open? What's the reply rate?
Yeah, so last week it was 60%, and this week
60% open.
yeah, open rate, and then this week it is 57. So you can kind of see the high level stats in there. We can go
And
into like
then,
multiples and
yeah, what's the reply? Like, how many replies total did this campaign get?
so far it's gone in 4% this week. So we're looking at 4 this week, and then I believe like 10 last week. it's interesting because like I was really beating myself up with these campaigns, but because of the Memorial Day weekend, I'm seeing this across the board with other partners as well. So a little bummed, 4% is a huge drop from 10%, but yeah, that is it. So we've had, I believe, 14 responses in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and that is actually kind of a good note to make when you're analyzing campaign statistics. It's important to know, like, let's say you're sending out an email campaign on a weekend like we have this weekend, a holiday 3-day weekend. Most people are off on Monday. Oftentimes by like Thursday, many of them are out of the office. So you're going to see like lower rates around things like holidays, or, if there's any like regional or local things, like just kind of keep those in mind as you're analyzing the performance of your email data. So for us to go from like 10% response to 4% response the week before, and then the week today, or ending today, which is right before a holiday weekend, we can say with some level of certainty that like that is probably impacting our campaigns, and we may see an increase next week, probably Wednesday, Tuesday-ish, when people get back into the office. So we may see a post-holiday spike that also is going to skew our data up the same way it's skewing our data down now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I'm looking at one right now. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So if you're watching on podcast, I'll just show you kind of the back end. So on this one campaign, so far I think this is this week. Yeah, this week was 69 that were sent, 72% open rate and 4% response rate. But for last week, we can see the same campaign. Where is it? There we go. Right. So like that one went from 7% to 4% versus the other one that went from 10 to 4. So yes, for sure it is being affected, but and that's why it's so important to like if we looked at this campaign specifically, right, and we just compared this week to last week without knowing context or anything, we could see that something major is up, right? That's why context around having quantity is so important. So and quality data, right? You don't want to look, it's better to look at things from like a month view, but in this case we just looked at it for 2 weeks. But yeah, Justine, what were some of the responses that we got?
Yeah,
on the
so
negative side first.
Yeah, so this one says, I like the intro line to your email. Nice work. I don't really want any calls or leads right now, but thanks. So that was kind of a positive and a negative there. But
yeah,
that's the nicest no we would ever get.
yeah.
they get progressively worse. But yeah, in that case, like,
yeah,
what can we learn from that? One, I like the opening line. That's a good indicator to really look at the opening line for this person, right? And say what really stood out to them. Again, for these campaigns, all of them are customer and by our team. So we need to understand a little bit more, because this is pretty good feedback, right? Like, no, they're not interested, right? So I want to look at the call to action and the offer, but we can glean something from it. Again, don't want to look in isolation, but something to make a note of. Maybe we brought up, instead of using a social media account, we saw that they were featured in a Chamber of Commerce event or whatever, right? If that's the case, we should do a little bit more of a test and see if that produces more responses.
Yeah, to give people a general idea of how our typical email templates look like, it's going to be custom point is the first line usually. So that could be anything from like, hey, John, I saw your post on LinkedIn about fintech's evolution into X. That's super awesome. So glad I read it. And then follows along with our offer, call to action, and those types of things that you would see in maybe a more typical email template. But most of these emails that we're sending out have a totally custom first line, to the point where like if you sent it to someone else, it wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, and we'll report on this next week. I actually am doing a test right now on a single sentence campaign where there's actually no customization, custom sentence. The question that we're asking is custom. So targeting a very specific niche with this test, the home improvement space. And for instance, we're saying, hey, Mary, are you looking for are you looking to replace 10 more garages in Manchester, right? Uh, that's so specific, right? Because they are a company that replaces garage doors in a very specific city. And I'm trying to understand the pain point. Like, are you looking to do 10 more of these opportunities? So it is very interesting on like, and that's why testing is so important, right? So yes, focus on having and again, steal the templates that we had, right? And the one I'm running is just a test, but awesome. So what was another negative response that we got? Laura said this time I want your feedback on it.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are kind of the next three I have are kind of all the same. I don't know if I should bunch them together
Yeah,
and
just
read
let's
them
just
all
bunch
at the
them up.
same time. Okay, so message 1 says, not interested, but thanks for reaching out. Message 2 says, I'm not interested. And message 3 says, nope, I'm good.
Okay. So those are all actually still relatively like nice responses that they're saying to us. That's another thing you want to keep in mind. If you're getting a lot of really angry, vulgar, horrible responses, which, like, don't get me wrong, if you're doing outbound in one way or another, you're going to get those responses, right? But like, if that's a very large portion, you definitely need to take another look at your copy. If like all your negative responses are like, why are you messaging me? Like, this is horrible. Like, don't ever talk to me again. Like, that's not really what you want. Like, you don't want to be leaving that taste in people's mouths. All of these people relatively are like, I'm just not interested. I don't have a need for you right now. So what that tells me is on our data side, maybe we didn't do as good of a job with every single one of these leads, figuring out if they're in market for what we're selling. So that's kind of the biggest thing that jumps out to me. Aside from that, maybe our call to action needs a little bit of help. But also a no is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, ultimately, if you're messaging a ton of people and let's say it's a really specific thing, they're not all going to be in market. Like, they're just not going to. So a lot of these you could reach out to later at a later point in time. And you could just say, let's say 2 or 3 months from now, like, hey, John, I know that you weren't interested then, but like, has anything changed? So because you haven't necessarily burned these bridges, because they aren't like a horribly negative responses, they're mostly just being like, I'm not interested or not right now. That's a good general for like us to be able to say like, okay, like, these people are reading our message. So that's a positive. They have gotten the custom point. They felt a need to respond to us because that's how personal these messages are, which is also huge. And beyond that, we're also getting like, for the most part, they're saying they're not interested. So like, that tells us really that like our data can probably be cleaned up on this one a little bit more. It's really hard to figure out before you message somebody though, if they need your service. So I would take that one with a grain of salt, but it seems mostly like a timing thing.
It's a really good point that Larissa brought up on like these people might not be great fits now. The only caveat to that is if they're like, hey, no, do not like ever contact me again, unsub, all of those, then that's a different conversation because that means like do not like legally you cannot do that again. But these other people that I know, they can be retargeted later through email or LinkedIn. So just keep that in mind. The other caveat to it, and this we've run many tests on this, people who do not open your emails, typically, if you were to re-engage them in another campaign, right, and they don't open their emails, it's so weird. Like because I've run, and some of the worst numbers I've ever gotten were from retargeting on non-opens, but on actual responses, those are really good. That's really good insight. And to Larissa's point, like I really think that data was a problem here. We were testing out a little bit different in the agency space. So I think you're onto something there. And it's good to look objectively because I looked at the nose and I'm like, oh, those are fine. I've gotten a lot worse said. So I really just want to echo what Larissa said there on the nose. Don't feel like I can add too much to the conversation past that, which is often very weird for me. So I think she knocked out of the park there. So Justine, let's move on to positive responses. What's going on?
Yeah, so we have 4 here that are kind of similar, asking similar things. So I'm just going to read all 4 of these, and then we can talk about how we would respond. So the first one says, Sure, send me a one pager on what you do. Message 2 says, Nico, sure, ... Send over more info, ... Message 3 says, okay, I'll bite, send info, please. And then message 4 says, of course, you can send some info over. Candidly, not sure we have the budget to do anything, but it never hurts to learn about new opportunities.
So I want to show a theme here where most of them were like, okay, send me more info, which is a very difficult spot to be in. And I'll echo this to anyone. More info could be a nice no. And that's why what I did here was probably a little different than what most agencies would do, which is one, I actually called them. A lot of them have numbers in their actual bios, right?
Their email signatures.
Yeah, sorry, email signatures. And so I actually called them, and they are so shocked when someone actually responds. They're like, "Oh yeah, this was you." And I always open it up with a little joke. Again, if that's interesting, I can share that. But I call them, and if they don't answer, that's fine. I'll leave a voicemail, and then I'll actually send them a custom loom. So for anyone that wants more info, they're so used to getting the same old boring text of like, "Oh, we're a lead gen company of doing X, Y, Z," and that's honestly, that's not interesting. So what I do is I actually bypass that and make them a custom video, which forces them to actually acknowledge who I am. That I'm a real person. I bring up my energy. I show them things, and I can do that all within a 5-10 minute window, like if that. So, or yeah, 5-10 minute window. So it really doesn't take me that much to respond. They get a 90-second video, shows who I am, and the conversion rates on those are so much better. So with these, yes, I'm going to respond, but first I'm going to call if I can, if they have their number. 2, I'm going to make something custom. And then 3, I'm going to keep following up, which especially with these, my follow-up sequence tends to be a little bit more aggressive. So if you respond on a Monday, I'm going to respond on Monday. Then I'm going to follow up on a Tuesday. Then I'm going to follow up on a Thursday. I'm going to follow up on a Tuesday. Then I'm going to follow up on a Friday. So every 3 days or so after that initial contact, you're going to hear from me. So just don't drop those, especially when they want more information. Like I need to qualify them or disqualify them. And the last one that was like, candidly, you don't have the budget. That's just a objection. That doesn't mean it's a no. Maybe they don't. I knew from the data that they were doing more than $1 million a year. So I said, that's fine. We have other models besides retainers like pay per lead. That is often more advantageous to start. So there's just different ways that you can actually do it than just sending a blank PDF that no one's ever going to read.
Yeah, so that's one thing that's like a really good point. You'll notice in a lot of our in our messaging, in our responses, in like everything we do, we have a pretty heavy focus on personalization. It's really because at the end of the day, everybody in the world has received basically like a form message that's like totally not custom, where you're just like, okay, like they're just trying to get business out of me, like whatever, I'm just going to ignore that. You would never respond to it, you'd never engage with it. Or if you do, you have to just do that in such a higher volume. So to get what we were talking about before, like 20 responses, you don't have to reach out to 400 people, you have to reach out to like 1,500 people. So that's the difference. And also being able to maintain data integrity at that scale is a bit harder. So a lot of things to definitely keep in mind here. But especially with a lot of these positive responses, many of them are like, send over more info, send a one pager. Like they want a really quick summary of what you're doing to be able to determine if it's worth their time at all. So again, to Nico's point, that personalization forces them to at least consider the opportunity of working with us.
So I have one last positive response. It's a little bit different. They ask some like more unique questions, I guess. So I kind of want to see how your response will be different to this one. So it says, how could you do that? How about with a niche market? Do you mostly work with agencies?
Larissa, do you want to take a stab at it?
Well, biggest thing here is like, first acknowledge that's indicating to me more interest even than somebody saying, send over more info. Like if that's all they're saying, send over more info, very well, you could still be kind of falling on deaf ears. They're just saying, okay, send over more info. I'll keep you in my Rolodex in case I ever feel I need you, which is a better spot to be in than a no. But something like this is indicating like, they actually read our message and understood the message we were trying to get across. B, they don't just want more info, they want to know how you do it. So they want to know like the actual details, because they're wondering, they're thinking in the back of their head, you can definitely tell from this message, will this work for my agency? Like, will this work for me? So that's kind of what the person who's responding here is trying to get at from us, is like, how could you do that? Okay, well, like, we could do it through XYZ. How about with a niche market? My guess is they serve a very niche market if they're asking us this particular question. And they're asking, do you mostly work with agencies? My guess is they're an agency with a niche market who really cares about the process of how things are done. Because maybe, you know, usually when somebody has like this level of like interest, I guess you could say, I mean, interest is maybe not like the best way to phrase it, but when somebody is like thinking critically about like, how could you help me solve my problem? And they're doing so in such a way that like they're asking these in-depth follow-up questions that tells us a lot about them, who they serve, which for us as a way to get new business is super helpful to be able to understand like, yes, we can service niche markets. Yes, we mostly work with agencies. Yes, this is a solution that could fit for you. And again, paired with Nico's custom responses, he can make sure to address and answer all of those questions in the context of this particular business. So when somebody responds like that, we can write out kind of a lengthy response and maybe attach a video. It's probably better to like attach a video and just say, hey, I answered all your questions and went over like the whole process here. I thought that might be helpful for you. And I did it for the context of your business specifically so that we could look up this business. Let's say they're an SEO agency focusing specifically on D2C cosmetics brands, which is far more specific than just like an SEO agency, right? So they want us to know, like, can they service a particular niche? And so if we go and like look at their website, we can probably see the niche they serve. We can address that in our responses as well. So I think that's a great response. I would much rather have a lot more of those than people who are like, just send over some more info.
Yeah, and to that point too, you really have a great opportunity to do a couple things, right? One, you could write out a response, and it could literally be like, so I think they had like two things, like one, two, and then you can attach a video, right? Or if you are a fan of video, that's okay. You can answer one, two, and then ask a clarifying question, or see if they would like a 2 minute, 3 minute, 5 minute call to really help understand if this is even worth it, right? Because they didn't say exactly the specific niche. And I remember this prospect, they didn't have it wasn't 100% clear who it was on the website that they were serving, right? So in a couple seconds, I can understand like, oh, do you want to go after dentists? I have no route that I can go and be successful for you in dentists, right? So like that's not going to work out. So it really like you want to understand that emails are meant to be openers to conversations, not to close deals. Just because all your data shows that this is a good prospect doesn't mean that you are going to jive with them, that you're going to actually enjoy the work, that you can actually produce results. That's why you often need phone calls. That's why you're an agency, right? You're not a SaaS company, because often there's variables out of your control, right? Unless you control every single thing, it's hard to know that it's going to work 100% of the time. So that's my biggest feedback there is like, use these both positive and negative to, yes, influence your campaigns to make them stronger and more personalized to that person, but also know that you're looking for responses. Like if you don't get a sale from an email, that's okay. You should be measuring first responses. Actually, you should be first measuring open rates. When you have open rates down, then you measure responses, both general, right? Both positive and negative. Then you measure the ratio between positive and negative. Then you measure how many closed deals are happening from those yeses. Then you measure how your to retargeting is to the negative ones. So it all is part of the journey. Like I know someone that I advised that email would be a great solution for them. They didn't start working with us and actually got a couple domains. They blasted 500 people in the first day of that domain not being warmed up, and they got the account suspended. And they asked me what to do. And I said, burn it. It's a done domain. Like, you didn't follow the steps that I said. I'm sorry. Like, it's not going to work. So, they were thinking volume, everything like that, when the opposite is what you have to focus on. So that's it for the 19th episode. So exciting that next time it will be the 20th, and we're just gonna keep rocking and rolling. So, team, any last closing remarks before we jet on this beautiful day?
Don't forget to drink your water. Stay hydrated. That's my
Preach,
closing remark.
preach, preach, preach. And we'll have a lot more. I think now that we're getting more tactical, again, if you have any feedback for us, nico@boundlessmedia.com, always looking for ways that we can improve the podcast, serve you better, and be more valuable than any other podcast that you ever listened to. So, also check out our fancy new website, getboundlessmedia.com. So, team, thank you guys so much. Audience, thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you guys next week. Peace.